And we are rolling.
Okay, thank you very much. It is Thursday, July 30th, and this is a engineer committee meeting. I'll start by taking roll. This is Michael Schulz, Executive Director for the Architects and Engineers Board, and I will start with a roll call. Mr. Alton Hithcote.
I am present.
Mr. Ricky Burside.
Here.
Mr. Robert Campbell.
Here.
Mrs. Catherine Ware.
Here.
And Mr. Stephen King.
Here.
Okay, with everyone being here, I will go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Chairman to begin your meeting.
Michael, this is Maria Bush. May I just read the statement of necessity into the record real quick?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Sorry, Maria.
No problem. So I just have to do this. It's required by statute. You guys just bear with me. This is an emergency scheduled meeting of the Tennessee Board of Architectural and Engineer Examiners Engineer Committee, which is taking place via teleconference on Thursday, July 30th, 2020. Notice of this meeting was posted to the board's website on Wednesday, July 9th, 2020. As there's not a physical quorum present, statement of necessity is read into the record and filed with the Secretary of State as required by statute. Pursuant to TCA 844-108B2, if a physical quorum is not present at the location of a meeting of a governing body, in order for a quorum of members to participate by electronic or other means of communication, the governing body must make a determination that a necessity exists. That determination must include a recitation of the facts and circumstances on which it was based. Further, TCA 844-108A3 defines necessity as matters to be considered by the governing body at that meeting require timely action by the body, that physical presence by a quorum of the members is not practical within the period of time requiring action, and that participation by a quorum of the members by electronic or other means of communications is necessary. As stated, this is an emergency meeting, a Tennessee Board of Architectural and Engineer Examiners Engineer Committee. The purpose of this meeting with members attending by teleconference is to discuss the ballot for the National Council of Examiners for Engineering and Surveying. All voting will be conducted by roll call. Thank you.
And
Hey,
before,
Michael,
I'm sorry, Michael, I was just going to say, as a reminder, if everybody could keep their mics on mute when they're not talking, that will really help with the audio quality and make sure we can hear everybody.
Hey, Michael, this is Alton. We don't need to vote on that, obviously, I don't think, do we? That we agree that the statement of necessity needs to be voted on in any way?
no, the statement of necessity does not need to be voted on. Maria, were you about to say something?
No, I was just going to echo. It does not. It just has to be read into the record.
Okay. Well, with that, Mr. Alton, I will turn it over to you.
Well, okay. Yeah, that being the case, I think I'd like to turn it back over to you. I think the purpose for the meeting is because we received NCEES officer elections ballot for the annual meeting of the Southern Zone, and they have asked us to review, and I'm assuming provide our votes because they ran up against the time frame for getting this submitted. Am I incorrect in that?
No, that is correct. This is a first, as far as I can tell, it says so on the first page of the ballot that this is the first time that they're doing it this way. And under normal circumstances, these would be voted in person, and you all would have had the ability to discuss this prior to the national meeting, which I believe is coming up in August. So you would have been able to discuss this at the board meeting or the regularly scheduled committee meeting. But in this case, since the deadline preempts that, we're having to have this meeting here.
And I know that on the ballot, there are a number of votes already entered. For example, for the treasurer, Andrew Zetwaller is entered. For the secretary treasurer, Southern Zone officer election, Chris Ramsayer is already, the X is entered by his nomination.
Well-
are we
No.
No, I'm sorry. When I had sent you an attachment yesterday, or 2 days ago, I'm sorry, two afternoons ago as a reference, that was the ballot that had been filled out by the land surveyors. And that was merely for reference only, just so you could see how the land surveyors were voting. You should
Okay.
have received a blank ballot as well.
Was it not attached to that email? Because I only received this one.
It was attached in an email from Michael last Friday, the original ballot.
Okay. And Michael, I'm assuming what we would want to do is go through the ballot and submit our own nominations as a group.
That is correct. And I have a ballot here that I will indicate your choices on, and I can then sign it and send it in alongside with the land surveyors.
And do you, in the event that there are questions, do you have some of the special committee information, like Bylaws Motion 1 and Bylaws Motion 2, 3, 4, 5, et cetera?
I do not have those motions.
Alton, this is Kathy. I can tell you where to find them if you like.
That'd be great, Kathy. Thank you. Have you reviewed them?
I have. It's not anything all that exciting. There's just a couple of questions I think we might want to discuss, but it's pretty benign stuff because it's only the absolute essential. But you have to go to the NCEES.org website, and it has an annual meeting link, and you click on that. You should have gotten an email like back in June with a special link to the actual site, and then you go there and you hit the documents, and can't remember what it's called. Hang on, I'll tell you. Action items and conference reports, updated July 20th. It's only 108 pages long, so I don't know why you didn't read it in detail and take notes. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I know. That's my job.
All I've got, once you get to that document, if you'll follow along where it says page 27 of the document, then it takes you straight to the actual item that's up for voting.
All right, I'm on their website. Under what heading is that? Is it under engineering or news or?
Has something to do with annual meeting. You'll have to find the annual meeting page. I went to it from a link in my email. We got an email back in June, and it said, here's a link to everything you need to know about the annual meeting. So you click on that link, and it opens up that page.
The link is actually shown on that ballot. It's on the very first page in the introduction, about the fourth paragraph down. The link is there in blue, ncees.org/annual_meeting. And it'll take you to the page that you need to go to.
Okay, I see that. Let's go ahead and move forward then. Has everybody reviewed the surveyor's recommendations? Those that they actually entered?
I think that was just intended as an example of what the ballot was going to look like. I don't think we need to take what their votes were into consideration necessarily.
Oh, I don't either, but I'm asking, has everybody reviewed that?
Yes.
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 Okay. Do we want to, I'm assuming what we want to do, Michael, is go through these individually and enter our, or have discussion and enter our recommendation independently, obviously?
Yeah, that would be the process, unless you all have come to review a number of these and kind of have a decision you think might work, where you could do a few of them on block. But yes, we could go through one by one and just take a quick roll call vote and then move forward.
Okay. Then shall we go to the first item on the ballot, which is the president-elect?
Okay.
Brian
Yes, sir.
Robertson from Colorado.
Does anybody know Brian Robertson? I don't know him. I'm just curious.
I mean, I've heard him speak in meetings for a number of years, and I've kind of liked what he said in the meetings and the stances that he's taken.
Good enough for me. I just wanted to know if somebody knew, and thanks, Ricky. So I'll make a motion that we put a check in the box for yes on Brian Robertson for president-elect.
Second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? There being none, I'm assuming, Michael, that we'll take a roll call vote.
That is correct. And I will call the roll. Mr. Alton Heathcote.
I vote yes.
Mr. Ricky Bursar.
Yes.
Mr. Robert Campbell.
Yes.
Ms. Kathy Ware.
Yes.
Mr. Stephen King.
Yes.
Okay. We move on to item number 2, the NCEES Treasurer.
Okay, we have, I actually have worked, I'm on the Finance Committee with Andrew and have worked with him, and like Ricky, I've heard him speak at a number of the Southern Zone conferences and joint conferences that I've been to. He does an outstanding job on the Finance Committee, and I think would be an excellent treasurer. And I would like to make a motion that we nominate Andrew Zetweiler for the position of NCEES Treasurer.
Second.
We have a nomination by, sorry, go ahead.
Motion and a second. I'm sorry, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to have some discussion. And this is from our standpoint of when we've been a little bit more contrarian on the way that NCEES seems to kind of go out and waste their money or don't have a plan for their reserve. And it appears to me that they're one of the few organizations that during the teeth of the pandemic can still make money hand over fist and whine about it. Stephen Arndt has kind of seemed to be a little bit more of a fly in the ointment kind of person, if I'm not mistaken. I know he's kind of a weird dude, but is Andrew got somebody that's got a little bit of vision and somebody that can kind of stand up to the organization and just not continue some of the stuff that they've done? I mean, and that's kind of been our complaint as a board for a number of years.
I will, I can just tell you my personal experience. Go ahead, Kathy.
I was just going to say that I agree that that's top of mind. I did play golf one time with Andy at one of the meetings that we went to a long time ago, and he seemed to be very fiscally conservative when I asked him a few things. I don't know, Stephen, if you feel strongly about him, that's fine with me. But I did have some personal conversations with Andy probably 2 years ago when we had a chance away from a meeting, and he seemed to be conservative and empathetic to some of the things that I asked questions about. Of course, at the time, I really wasn't even as well versed as I became after that meeting. But I think he would fall on the side of fiscally conservative. I don't know about standing up to the board, I don't know if he is a strong backbone, get up and, say what he really thinks, or if he's just a go with the flow kind of guy. I can't speak to that. So I would be open-minded to see if you feel differently.
I can speak to that if you want me to.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was in the finance committee meeting in February. It actually convened. We were supposed to go to San Diego. We met here in Nashville. They changed the venue, and he was the moderator for the finance committee meetings. And we had, let's see, what is Tim's? Tim Rickborn was there, and the president-elect, Chris Knotts, was there at the meeting. And I will say there were a number of issues where Andrew called not only them to task, but also Betsy to task on the way the allocations were made, to projections that they had, the finance committee had this year for loss, which they always project loss and they never have a loss. The surplus, I asked a lot of questions about the surplus revenue, what I call surplus revenue. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that NCEES has that much money in reserves. And Andrew was extremely knowledgeable about the process and the reason why, but he took a very firm stance when Chris Knotts wanted to keep the money in reserves. One of the things that Andrew said was that in previous finance committee meetings and at NCEES board meetings, they had agreed that once the rollout for the computer-based testing was finalized and that we had reached the end and it was fully implemented, then he actually had been part of the team to develop a plan for the redistribution of that money. And they're, in essence, planning on assisting states with the promotion of licensure by trying to lower the fees and supplementing the fees by using that reserve fund. So I appreciated the fact that he was willing to support what so many members apparently have an issue with.
Alton, that's good information. I appreciate that. I'm good to go then. We don't need the treasurer to be a rubber stamp guy like I think they have been in the past, especially if they don't represent our interests.
I agree.
Robert, I kind of appreciate and like our stance as a state to kind of being a contrarian. In this case, it sounds like Andrew would be maybe a little more capable of being a contrarian because he's so knowledgeable, probably more knowledgeable than Stephen Arndt is about the past decisions made and commitments made.
I'm good with that. No, I'm good with that.
Good discussion. Is there any additional discussion before we call for a vote? There being none, Michael, would you lead us through the roll call?
Yes, sir. Mr. Alton Huthcote.
I vote yes. I'm sorry, I vote yes for Andrew Zetweiler.
Okay. Mr. Ricky Bursay.
Andrew Zetweiler, yes.
Correct. Yes, this vote is for Andrew Zetweiler for treasurer.
Okay.
Mr. Robert Campbell.
Yes.
Ms. Kathy Ware.
Yes.
Mr. Stephen King.
Yes.
All right. The motion is passed, and we can move on to secretary.
Sure. Again, I can see what the surveyors have done, and again, that is in no way a reflection of what we need to do, but there appears to be only one candidate for that position, Chris Ramsayer. Does anybody have any comment before we begin? Does anybody know Chris?
Robert, you know who this is?
I'm trying to remember. I'm bad with
This is our PhD friend from Oklahoma.
Oh, that butthole guy. I know who you're talking about now.
Yeah. However, I will say, as much as he has kind of bothered us in the past, at this past meeting, I think he very strongly and eloquently defended against engineering technology degrees being acceptable education. So I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah, I know you're talking about now.
Yeah.
Well, I think in this particular case, we have the choice to either vote for the sole nominee or enter a vote of no vote. Michael, is that correct?
That is correct. You could choose to yes, you can vote no vote.
I'm okay, Alton. I'm okay voting for him because, you know, in the Italian culture, you keep your friends close and your enemies closer. And so I'm okay with it.
I'd like to be part of your mafia, Ricky. Would you like to put that in the form of a motion?
I will. I'll make a motion that we vote yes for Chris Ramsayer for Secretary Treasurer, Southern Zone.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll make a second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion? If there being none, Michael, would you lead us through the roll call vote?
Sure. This vote is for Secretary Treasurer Chris Ramsayer and Mr. Alton Heathcote.
Yes.
Mr. Ricky Burside.
Yes.
Mr. Robert Campbell.
Yes.
Ms. Kathy Ware.
Yes.
Mr. Stephen King.
Yes.
The motion has passed, and we can now move to the motions for council vote section, starting with the approval of the 2019 annual meeting minutes.
I make a motion we approve.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? There being none, again, Michael, would you lead us through the roll call?
I'd love to. It's the vote for approval of the annual meeting minutes. Mr. Alton Heathcote.
Yes.
Mr. Ricky Burside.
Yes.
Mr. Robert Campbell.
Yes.
Ms. Kathy Ware.
Yes.
Mr. Stephen King.
Yes.
Okay, and we can move on to Special Committee on Bylaws.
Very good. And again, as you can see, the first one is for bylaw motion number 1 is the amendment to section 4.04, the board audit committee. The rationale for the change was that the ACCA feels that the final approval of the annual financial audit should rest with the board of directors and not the board audit committee. It's also proposed to add the finance committee chair to eliminate the potential of a tie vote. So there'd be, I guess, an odd number of voting members instead of an even number of voting committees or voting members. Is there any discussion on this? I'm sorry. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Alton, I kind of wanted to know, since you are on the finance committee and had some insight, do you have some insight into this, whether this is a good idea? Mainly the question of making sure that the board of directors is the body making the decision.
Yeah, when we discussed this in February, I think it was sort of the consent of the finance committee to support I do remember this discussion, to support this motion and leave that with the board of directors.
And that, everybody, that makes sense, because ultimately, if some malfeasance is found, it would be the board of directors that would be held responsible for that. So everyone that I've been associated with, the board of directors is the one that approves the audit or submits the audit. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, same.
Okay, do you want to put that in the form of a motion?
Yeah, I'll just make a motion that we approve. I'm sorry, Kathy, I jumped on you.
No, go ahead.
Make a motion, we approve motion number 1, amendment to bylaws 4.09.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, I think Ricky.
2 seconds. That means 4 times.
Okay, good. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? There being none, Michael, would you lead us through the roll call?
Yes, sir. This is the vote for bylaws, vote to approve bylaws motion number 1. Mr. Alton Heathcote.
Yes.
Mr. Ricky Bursite.
Yes.
Mr. Robert Campbell.
Yes.
Ms. Kathy Ware.
Yes.
Mr. Stephen King.
Yes.
All right, that passes. We can move to bylaws motion 2, please.
Very good. And again, the summary of bylaws motion 2, which is section 6.02, quorum and voting. The ACCA is concerned that the use of the proxy voting could have a detrimental impact on the attendance at zone interim and annual meetings and have negative consequences on the council. The board of directors endorses this. I think I may have a little bit of a concern about that. I mean, there's a number of reasons for people not being able to attend a meeting, but they want to enter a vote. I actually sort of like the proxy opportunity, but I'd be interested to hear and understand what any other members of the board feel about this.
Well, this is Kathy. I think if I read it correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think what it means is that the engineers board cannot vote on behalf of the surveyors board. I don't think that it means that individuals can't have a say for their member board to have a vote. Am I understanding correctly?
I'm reading that now, Kathy.
I took it as, Kathy, if a state decided not to send a delegation to the annual meeting, that they could arrange to vote by proxy, and that this motion would not allow that. And my thought is, Alton, I am sympathetic to if there's circumstances where a state couldn't show up, that they would still get a vote. I think that makes sense in one way. The other way I feel, though, is that the state governments can make unwise decisions about boards. That I know there's a huge difference between being at those meetings and just reading about them. You learn so much more about the issues being there, and anything that could persuade a state government to keep the delegation at home, I think is just moving in a direction, big picture wise, that's not good. So for that reason, I was okay with the motion, because I didn't want something out there to give the states not to send delegations. I think that would be harmful.
If you look at their synopsis, it was voting by one member board on behalf of another member board not physically present in the meeting room at the time of the vote shall not be permitted.
So it's not about it.
So in other words, go ahead, Ricky.
So could that be construed as not having a delegation at the meeting?
If this passes and you don't have a delegation or a delegate representing your board at the meeting, it appears to me that you can, as it exists now, you can give your proxy, you can give your vote by proxy to another member board. And what this would do would eliminate that.
Well, I think it's just for clarification. I think in the past it's always been there is no proxy voting at all, and then I think it came up as a question, and so this is for clarification to make it abundantly clear that if you have two boards, one of them cannot vote on behalf of the other. So this doesn't change anything. I think it is a clarification only, and I mean, I'm in favor of this. I think that boards have to be represented in order to know the issues, because it's like this year, it's so hard to even know what's going on because we're not attending any meetings and listening and having engaging conversations. But also I would say a member board can be represented by one person.
Correct.
So each member board should find it within their means to be able to send one member, even if there's severe budget contractions across the board, and we all know that that's a fact that we're going to be facing down the road. But even if you only have one member, the member board still votes.
That's correct. And that
member representative can also be an executive director. All you have to have is a representative of your board there.
As long as they're approved by the board.
That's right.
But again, if for whatever reason, a member, any member from the board cannot be there, as it exists right now, they can issue a proxy, their proxy on a vote to another member board to enter for them. And they would no longer be allowed to do that.
I don't think they allow proxy voting. Are you saying that they have allowed it in the past? Because I didn't know that.
I'm looking at what it says. It says that the ACCA feels that the use of proxy voting may have a detrimental impact on the attendance at zone interim and annual meetings and have negative consequences on the council. So apparently they have allowed it. And it must exist in the law as it's written now. And they're trying to eliminate that. They're trying to eliminate proxy voting.
But Alton, it does say it's to clarify. Let me get that language. It says the purpose of the amendment is to clarify that member boards must be present to vote. That kind of makes me think that Kathy's right, that that it's not intended to allow proxy voting, but somehow it must have happened, and they feel a need to clarify that they must be present to vote.
See, I don't know or understand why you would have to be present to vote. If for whatever reason your board cannot be represented at a meeting, why would that exclude you or preclude you from being able to express your opinion by entering a vote?
Yeah, I think there's an argument for that. I mean, I think a lot of times you're right. You would know enough to vote, but there are quite a few times where I think we listen to the discussion that's going on in the room by the people speaking at the microphones that help greatly inform our decision. I remember Kathy Ware getting up at a microphone and wowing the whole room. That was, pretty impressive. So I think when you're not there, you cannot hear what people are saying at the microphones from the other states. And that's part of what ought to inform us on how to vote.
I would think that with our ability, and again, the COVID-19 has accentuated that, with our ability to perform these things virtually, why couldn't they broadcast any meeting virtually and allow somebody to? I would understand if they had that capacity and somebody had the ability to join virtually, that would that constitute them being physically present? I don't want to take away somebody's ability to vote on an issue just because they're not sitting in the room.
Well, I do. I think that's exactly what this is intended to do. So I think that's great that we're having this discussion. I think this is exactly what is intended, is that if you are not, because here's what voting by one member board on behalf of another member board not physically present in the meeting room at the time of the vote shall not be permitted. So, I mean, it's a great point of discussion, but I do think that is exactly the issue. Must you be physically present? And the vote is yes or no.
This is Robert. Let me weigh in on that. I kind of agree that I think we ought to be physically present. And Alton, I understand your point, but I don't think the technology's there on any level to have a valuable discussion with proxy voting from a virtual world. I mean, hell, how many people we have on this call right now? What, 12 or something? And bandwidth's not there to allow us to see each other and to kind of interact like you would in a normal meeting. Can you do that when you've got 300 people in a room? So I think there's a point where that becomes a valid discussion, that maybe as the technology improves or something, to where you can have a little bit more of a real virtual interaction. But now it's just not there. And I think you need to be in the room. You know, we've always said that about legislative stuff. You need to be present to win, you know, and I think having one person here is not a huge burden on people to have one of their members at that meeting. So I think I want to keep it in person for right now.
So if we pass this or we endorse this, then in essence what we're saying is, regardless of whether they have the virtual capability of attending, that would negate their ability to vote on any issue unless they are physically present.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I mean, I just think right now, and I'm not trying to water your point down. I just don't think it's possible to have as many people are supposed to be in those meetings. If we tried to do that all virtual, I think that would be absolute. There's some words I probably shouldn't say, but I think it would be terrible to try to conduct that kind of meeting. Now, maybe in the future we get there where, you know, you can see everybody in the room and everybody can kind of be like like they're there. But right now we're not there, and you lose a lot when you don't have people, when you don't see what people are doing and how they're moving, you know, how they're talking, and you just miss a lot of stuff. And the side conversations that go on between people making motions, I mean, you miss a lot of that.
Okay. All right. So we've had a lot of conversation. Does somebody want to enter a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the bylaws motion 3. Is that what we're on, motion 3?
We're on motion
2.
Bylaws motion 2.
Okay. I make a motion that we approve bylaws motion 2, amending 6.02 bylaws.
Second. We have a motion. Okay, Kathy, you're seconding. We have a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion? There being none, Michael, would you lead us through the roll call?
Yes, sir. This is for bylaws motion number 2, amend 6.02. Mr. Alton Heathcote.
In deference to my more esteemed colleagues, I'm going to vote no.
Mr. Ricky Burside,
Yes.
Mr. Robert Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Kathy Ware,
Yes.
Mr. Stephen King.
Yes.
All right, the motion is passed, and we move on to bylaws motion number 3. And if I may, before we continue, Ricky, we're getting a lot of feedback from your microphone. So if you could make sure to mute yourself when you're not speaking, that would be great.
Will do. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, bylaw motion number 3 is 10.0125 inactive status. In essence, what it, I guess, boiled down, what it talks about is examinees for the for board registration or exam. I'm sorry. Examinees may register and sit for NCEES examinations, even when their NCEES member board is in arrears. I suppose they haven't paid their dues to NCEES.
I'd like to make a motion of yes.
Okay. Okay.
I just think
we have a
it's so
motion.
obvious. We could just move on.
I agree. We have a motion and a second. Is there? I'm sorry, we don't have a second. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? There being none, Michael, would you lead us through the roll call?
Yes, sir. This is for bylaws motion number 3. Mr. Alton Heathcote,
Yes.
Mr. Ricky Burside,
Yes.
Mr. Robert Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Kathy Ware,
Yes.
Mr. Stephen King.
Yes.
Motion passes. We can move on to bylaws motion number 4.
Bylaws motion number 4 is from bylaw section 3.09, zone organization. The rationale for the change, the NCEES Board of Directors approved by council at 2019 annual meeting and proposed to make an amendment to the language that is more consistent with financial policies 3 and 4, which were also amended at the 2019 meeting. So this is more than anything else a housekeeping exercise.
I'll make another motion. Yes.
Thank you, Kathy. We have a motion. Is there a second?
It's Robert, second.
Oh, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? There being none, Michael, would you lead us through the roll call?
Yes, sir. This is for bylaws motion number 4. Mr. Alton Heathcote,
Yes.
Mr. Ricky Burside,
Yes.
Mr. Robert Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Kathy Ware,
Yes.
Mr. Stephen King.
Yes.
Motion passes, and we'll move on to motion number 5.
Motion number 5 is from bylaw section 7.04. They're requesting an amendment to the Committee on Education, where they're adding the language, the committee shall review the NCEES Engineering Education Standard and NCEES Surveying Education Standard annually and propose any revisions to the council for approval at the annual business meeting. Which I think is actually an exceptional idea. Is there any discussion? Any comments?
Well, I'll just say that I think that this came out of the very lengthy discussion that Ricky referenced about our last annual meeting, where we talked about changes that the committee made to the standards, basically on their own without regard to a vote by council. And so a lot of the various member boards were indignant that such a change could happen, because it appears that that was a trend that they were going to eventually, by fiat, just claim that technology degrees were equivalent. And so there was lots and lots of discussion over that. So what this did was formalize the emotional feeling in the room that those kinds of decisions going forward, we weren't just going to let that trend toward the least common denominator, but we were going to make the committee come back and ask for council approval. So that's where I think all that came from. Ricky, do you agree? I think you and I were there for that discussion.
Kathy, I think you're right.
So for that reason, I would make a motion to approve this. I think it's good to kind of force the committee's hand not to be able to go in and just make some behind the scenes changes that affect the entire council without council discussion. So I'd motion yes.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Ricky. We have a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion? There being none, Michael, would you lead us to the roll call, please?
Yes, sir. This is a motion to approve bylaws motion number 5. Mr. Alton Heathcote.
Yes.
Mr. Ricky Bursey.
Yes.
Mr. Robert Campbell.
Yes.
Ms. Kathy Ware.
Yes.
Mr. Stephen King.
Yes.
That motion passes, and we can move on to the Board of Directors section, motion 1.
Thank you, Michael. Motion 1, they move to approve, this is the board, moves to approve the application of the American Society of Plumbing Engineers to become a member of the NCEES Participating Organizations Liaison Council. And the board obviously endorses this. And I would, Ricky, you probably are a little closer to this than any of the rest of us as a mechanical engineer, but this seems to be a good thing.
Yeah, I don't know why it wouldn't be. I mean, the ASPE has been a resource for plumbing engineers since I came into the business. So they're a long established society that issues handbooks on to help engineers. So it sounds like a good idea to me.
I would agree. Is there any other comments, or would somebody like to put that in the form of a motion?
I'll make a motion. This is Robert.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I will second the motion.
Motion to approve. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Let me clarify that. That was a motion to approve, Alton. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I think we understood that. I think you parenthetically stated that, Robert. And
I'm
Kathy
sorry.
entered the second a little before Ricky did. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? There being none, Michael, would you lead us to the roll call vote?
Yes, sir. This vote to approve Board of Directors motion number 1. Mr. Alton Heathcote.
Yes.
Mr. Ricky Bursey.
Yes.
Mr. Robert Campbell.
Yes.
Ms. Kathy Ware.
Yes.
Mr. Stephen King.
Yes.
Well, Alton, we may proceed to motion number 2.
Thank you, Michael. Motion number 2 is to ratify amendments to NCEES zone meeting and continuity guidelines. And it appears that the lone amendment is down on the 6th line, that they're entering a new element requiring that nominations may only be made by a member board, which I guess I'm a little surprised that wasn't in there to begin with. I don't see a lot of explanation on that. I would have thought that would have been in there in the beginning anyway. I wasn't aware that somebody other than a member board could make those nominations.
I don't think they can. I think this is clarification. I think that it's always been that way, and then it was raised. I think one of the things that's come up recently, it has been a lot of conversation at these meetings about attendees by people who are not active member board voting members. So you have past presidents, and you have guests of the current president of the national organization, and you have these people who come in who are presidents of ASCE ASHRAE and other stuff, and there's a lot of activity that goes on and a lot of people who attend and have a voice at the annual meeting. And it has become quite, a background conversation of what are they doing here? Why are they allowed to speak? Why do they have standing in the organization? They're not a member. And there's a lot of that goes on. And so this is kind of a clarification to make sure that it is stated and not just assumed, because I think it's been assumed in the past, and I don't think they've ever had anybody actually do it. But it is stated as opposed to assumed that only a member board can make a nomination. So that's the reason, I think, for the clarification.
Good.
So
Thank you,
make
Kathy.
I'll make a motion that we endorse this Board of Directors motion number 2. Yes.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll go with the second. This is Robert.
Thank you, Robert. We have a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion? There being none, Michael, will you lead us through the roll call vote, please? Michael, did we lose you?
Michael, you're on mute.
There's always something that's going to get you. Okay. So this is a vote to approve Board of Directors motion number 2. Mr. Alton Heathcote.
Yes.
Mr. Ricky Burside.
Yes.
Mr. Robert Campbell.
Yes.
Ms. Kathy Ware.
Yes.
Mr. Stephen King.
Yes.
Okay, we can proceed to the Committee on Finances Budget motion 1.
Very good. And most of this was was discussed at this same annual Finance Committee meeting in February. And Andrew has presented it to the board, and then subsequent to that, now to the membership. Charge 1 was to review the results of 2018-19 financial audit and the current financial conditions of the council, including the recommended operating and capital budgets. The Finance Committee, through Betsy's help and the auditor's help, determined that there were no concerns or irregularities. I don't know how many of y'all actually review or read audit statements. And Robert, you may some, other than in your own company, but I read a lot of them every year. And you have to have a licensed auditor, CPA, perform an audit at the end of the year, which NCEES obviously does. And if there are irregularities or if there are findings, then the auditor has to report that, and usually that's contained in the back of the audit. And there were no findings or irregularities identified in the audit for NCEES for fiscal year 2018 and 19, or 2019 and 20. So this, I think, is again required as part of the acceptance of the budget. So is there any comment before we ask for a vote or a motion? There being none, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the Board of Directors endorsement for motion number 1, or number 2, excuse me.
Well, it's charge 1, I think, Kathy. I mean, if we want to, I suppose we could take these. Well, I don't think we want to do that. Let's just go independently. We're discussing right now charge 1. They have I think the motions, if you want to see the proposed motions, if you're looking at the same document that we were talking about earlier, the motion that the Finance Committee will enter is to move to adopt the 2020-2021 proposed operating budget. And just for clarification, Michael, are we being asked to vote on the charges, or are we being asked to vote on the motion?
My interpretation is that you're being asked to vote on the budget as a whole and approve that.
So that would be then their Finance Committee motion 1. So Kathy,
Yes.
is that what you're recommending?
Yes, I'm sorry. I was trying to mute myself and I hung up. So I'm back with you. Sorry about that. Talk about those technology challenges. Yes, finance motion number 1.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Sorry for the confusion. I was trying to correct myself and I was no longer on the call. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Ricky. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? There being none, Michael, will you lead us through the roll call?
Yes, sir. This is a vote for finance budget motion number 1 to approve. Mr. Alton Heathcote.
Yes.
Mr. Ricky Bursai.
Yes.
Mr. Robert Campbell.
Yes.
Ms. Kathy Ware.
Yes.
Mr. Stephen King.
Yes.
Fantastic. That is approved, and we can move on to budget motion number 2.
Okay, budget motion number 2 is to adopt the 2020-2021 proposed capital budget, which is their expenditure plan, shown on page 43 of the action items. I don't know how many of you have looked at that. I will tell you that the Finance Committee went over that with a fine-tooth comb and in a lot of detail. And I think more than anything else, that's why Tim Rickborn and Chris Knotts were there to offer explanation for, and Betsy too, for that matter, to offer explanation for every single one of the line items. So are there any questions or concerns or comments? There being none, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve. This is Robert.
I have a motion to approve from Robert. Is there a second?
Second.
I will second.
Kathy beat you, Ricky, just by a few seconds. So we have a motion by Robert and a second by Kathy. Is there any additional discussion? There being none, Michael, will you lead us to the roll call?
Yes, sir. This is a vote to approve the budget motion number 2. Mr. Alton Heathcote.
Yes.
Mr. Ricky Bursai.
Yes.
Mr. Robert Campbell.
Yes.
Ms. Kathy Ware.
Yes.
Mr. Stephen King.
Yes.
The motion has passed, and that is the last motion on the agenda.
Terrific. So we are completed.
We are completed from.
And
Yes,
Michael,
sir.
you're going to fill out the information and you're going to submit that to them. I know it's got to be in by tomorrow evening. So you're going to take care of all that.
Yes, sir. I will.
Are,
I'm actually going to go to the office today to scan this item and send it up this afternoon. I'll take care of the down in the member board signature. I can sign as the executive director and send it in.
we don't have to vote to give you that. It's automatically assumed that you have that signatory authority, correct?
Yes, as far as I know, there's not a vote required.
Good. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from the engineering committee?
It's really good to hear
There being none,
everybody's voice. I hope everybody's being safe and healthy, and I miss you guys. I just want y'all to know that.
Thank you
Thank
much.
you.
We'll talk to y'all next week.
Wait, we need a motion to adjourn, I believe.
I'll make a
Would
motion
anybody
to
like to-
adjourn.
Hey, Ricky, since motions to adjourn take precedence over all other items, we are adjourned. Thank you. Hey, guys, I want to echo Kathy's comments. I really miss getting to actually see and visit with everybody. I hate doing this virtually.
Same here. It's good to hear everybody's voices.
We'll get the virtual again next week. We'll talk to you then.
Yes.
Everyone have a great rest of the week.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, guys. Michael,
y'all.
thank you so much for leading us through this.
All right, thank you, sir. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.